Many English teachers and schools put too much emphasis on grammar and not enough emphasis on speaking. They spread the idea that you have to know all the grammar rules before you start speaking, which can have a negative effect on your confidence when you finally get to speaking. Now, you may be asking yourself, how can I possibly learn to speak English correctly if I don't study grammar? Well, that's exactly what Izzy and I are going to be talking about in today's episode. So stick around, because this podcast may just change your life forever. Oh yes, citizens of the world, this is 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗟𝗶 from RealLife English, where every week it is our mission to guide you beyond the classroom to speak English confidently and naturally, to connect to the world and actually use your English as the doorway to your greatest life. Hey, Izzy, hello. Our today's topic is so exciting for some English learners, but really intimidating for others, right? We're talking all about grammar today. I'm a grammar fan. I know you're not, and I've heard your English journey story quite a few times now, and I know that it's very close to our real life way. Yeah, it was all about immersion, a lot of input, repetition, mimicking, right? So like watching TV shows and like repeating after the characters. So when I try to imagine a process like that, somehow, yeah, I don't feel like your primary focus was grammar. And yet you achieved that native-like fluency. So I wonder, what was your secret to internalize all those grammar rules without learning them?
Interestingly, I studied grammar without knowing that I was studying, because if you just absorb all the structure that you're seeing in front of you, like let's say you're watching a movie, TV series, as you were saying, I would do that a lot, and I would pay attention to the structure, but I would not be associating what I was seeing to grammar rules. I was just learning the patterns. By the way, what's a pattern?
This is something that repeats. Like, imagine if you look at my dress now, it has a flowery pattern. So you can see flowers all over the dress. So this is a pattern. This is something that repeats, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you can see patterns everywhere, right? Everywhere where you can predict, anything that you can predict that it will continue happening, it's probably because you've seen that there's a pattern to that. Anyway, so you can find patterns in pronunciation in English, right? You can see that whenever you have, for example, the letters N, T in a word like internet, very often people, like natives, will say that as internet. So you have other words like, international or...
Enter, for example, enter. Or
enter,
winter,
right?
Winner,
exactly. And those are patterns in pronunciation. Now, patterns are a common feature, a common element in all languages. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to learn, right? Because as babies, as toddlers, young children, we pay attention to all these things that are repeating in the sounds, in the vocabulary, and we start to learn by repetition. So the more you pay attention to what you're seeing that's repeating, you start to internalize these structures, even if you don't know the names that are associated with that in grammar, like verb tenses, like future, simple present, right? All these ideas, these terms.
Maybe it's a curse of knowledge. But even when I prepare the lessons for our Learn English with TV series channel, right, I do use those grammatical terms because as a default, I assume that many learners start with grammar, so they are already familiar with those grammatical terms. But I really get it. But let me play a little bit like of a skeptical role today. And what if I don't believe you? Like, I've met so many students who say that I need to learn grammar because without knowing grammar, I don't understand how this language works. If I don't understand how this language works, I can't speak that language, right? Mm-hmm. But Izzy, you're a living proof that it is possible, right, without focusing on grammar so much. And still, how would you explain that to students like that who feel like, no, to speak the language, I need to know the grammar rules of this language?
I think those are two different things. I think it's possible to know how it works without associating that with terms and rules, that you know how to explain those rules. Just think about your own native language. Most people who speak your native language, let's say I'm Brazilian. So here in Brazil, we speak Portuguese, and most people don't know much about grammar. If I ask them to break down, to explain what they're saying, grammatically, to break down their sentences, I don't know if they're going to be able to, or I do know that they're not going to be able to because I've already done this experiment. So if native speakers of any language are not really sure, about the grammar that they're using, why should you when you're learning another language? But it's difficult because I think, as you're saying, we try our best to create a structure for our learning, and we may think that grammar is a nice curriculum, is a nice sequence of topics for you to go through in your learning, right, and achieve fluency. But that's not how you do with your native language.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds so true. Like, I mean, that's probably what's happening in their heads. Like, you have those 12 tenses in English, and imagine like you're learning simple tenses, right? Perfect tenses, continuous tenses, and you like just ticking off, and you imagine like by the time you've reached the 12th tense, you covered all grammar, you know English, but that's not really happening in real life. You may cover the whole textbook with all those 12 tenses and still don't speak English fluently. Mm-hmm. So again, we come back to that question, why so many students just like stick to grammar as if it's some kind of golden goose. I know it is the sure way to their fluency. It's not happening. And you were so right when talking about kids, right? They just naturally absorb all those patterns, what you were saying at the very beginning. We didn't bring this clip today, but I know there are experiments like that, very funny, like street interviews when they come up to English native speakers and they exactly ask all those terms for different English tenses. Not everyone can answer correctly, right? Mm-hmm. That is confusing. Mm-hmm. But I have a list of very short, I thought of it like a really burning questions type of part of this episode, that still, it would be so difficult to explain something to a student if you say that don't focus on grammar. Like, I don't know, let's try. Let me ask you like 3-4 questions and let's see if you're able to predict maybe if students can figure it out without focusing on grammar so much.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, grammar can be useful for analyzing what you're looking at, but I believe it's possible to do it without grammar, so without knowing the grammar terms.
Yeah, okay. So you don't have to explain it, everything here. It's just like, yeah, shortly, tell me what you think. Is it possible to master prepositions without memorizing their specific uses? And the prepositions we're talking here about, like look at, look after, yeah, care about.
It is possible, but you're going to be basically needing a lot of input, meaning you're going to be listening and watching a lot of media in English. If you don't live in a country where English is spoken as a first language, it is going to be difficult for you to internalize all these patterns, right? Without media, without consuming media. So that's fundamental. Regardless of your level, like if you don't consume enough media, you'll be lacking the natural instincts. So I think it is possible, but it's all because of all the input. And it'll come naturally to you. It'll just be something that you're absorbing without knowing. I myself remember studying the topic of in on at just to teach. And it was interesting to discover that, you have in, which is more broad. Is that it? Like on and then at? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. But it may vary, and it depends also on the context. You have like on a surface, right? Or in a place, inside of a place. At is like a location, like an address or something like that. So, but I think it all depends on the context. And the way I will know is just because I've heard these prepositions being used or collocated with different words so many times, I'll just know because of that. I just know it. I don't, but it's not because of a rule.
Mm-hmm. I imagine the answer to my question, to my second question, would be the same. How do I ensure I'm using the correct subject-verb agreement without drilling grammar rules. This is like she speaks, they laugh, they do, she does.
It's not all internalization without being aware that you're internalizing these things. I think you can be aware of the patterns, and you should. If you pay attention to the media you're consuming, you can start to activate your English as well. So it's not just about living your English. In our Real Life Way methodology, we talk about the importance of living your English. So this is this immersion that you referred to, but you can also activate your English. That's when you go from just being passive, with what you're consuming, and start to actively pay attention to what you are seeing, and maybe you can start to repeat some words or try to construct sentences using the same patterns that you are seeing. So again, it's just something that you don't have terms for it. You don't need to memorize rules, but you are trying to remember the structure of things by repeating. So I can give you one example here with a verb tense. Something that is called like conditionals, right? If it rains, we'll stay inside. So in that example, what's the logic of that? If you're just listening to like a podcast or watching a movie and you see that sentence and you try to understand the meaning of it, that's the very first thing you should do, is understand the meaning. And then you'll pay attention because that will probably come up in other movies, series, and other things that you consume. So maybe you hear something different, like if they leave now, they will catch the bus. Or if I find your book, I will return it to you. So you start to see the pattern. There's like, hey, there's always a will there. I think that it means that basically if this thing happens, then this other thing will happen as a consequence, right? So there's always a will. So maybe I should use will as well there. And so if na, then somebody will na. Nice. And then you can try and create your own sentences. And also, you start to notice that it's always like, if it rains, if they leave, if I find. So it's like, yeah, it's present, right? It's okay to know terms like present, future, past. I'm not the enemy of concepts, right? But it's just you don't need to obsess over exactly the very specific terms. That's my mindset for it.
Yeah, and I just thought of it that maybe it will be a recipe for a student not to freeze up, because like right now I imagine a situation when you learned your grammar, you know that there are 4 types or 3 types of conditionals plus a mixed type. And when you have all this knowledge in your head, and when you try to say an if sentence, in your head, what you do, you try to choose between, okay, is it the first type, second type, third type, which type it is? And it creates this gap, this pause in the flow of conversation, because you're just choosing between the types of conditionals.
Yeah, and that's not how a native speaks. People want to speak like a native, but they don't want to think like a native. And natives often don't think, right? And how do you do that? How do you achieve that level? I believe it's all through processing, like going through a lot of input and just absorbing what you are listening. And we're talking about natives. Something else that you should think about is when you speak with a person from another country and they're trying to speak your language, your native language, you don't care so much, if they make mistakes. We recorded a podcast last week about making mistakes and not fearing making mistakes, and this is totally related. So why shouldn't you be afraid of making mistakes? Maybe you're using grammar incorrectly. Why is it that that's not a problem? It's because what matters is effective communication. So something else you can think about, we're talking about natives, right? So you are a native as well of your native language. You speak your native language. And when somebody else goes to your country and tries to speak your native language, you don't really judge them because of grammar mistakes that they may make. And what you actually care more about is the fluidity, and the effectiveness of the communication. If they're able to just communicate their ideas and connect with you, right, on a more human level, you don't care so much about mistakes.
Exactly. That just reminds me of the third question, and I think you already answered it, but let me read it. That what if I make mistakes with articles? the, or absence of article, right? Will this affect my fluency? No, it will not. And Izzy just answered this question, because the most important thing is connection, is getting your message across, is understanding a person you are speaking with, right?
Can I just add something? Now, obviously, we're talking about informal communication and just being able to effectively connect with other people using English. But keep in mind that, yeah, if you're taking a test, if you are people are evaluating your English and how advanced you sound, maybe it's a job interview and you are actually going to be teaching English, they will care about these kinds of mistakes. That's exactly what they're looking for. You should speak correctly in that case.
But Izzy, let me bring us back a little bit earlier when you were explaining that natives, when they speak, they don't think. You better think before starting speaking, right? But what you mean is that they don't overthink, right? They don't analyze everything they're saying. That's what you wanted to say. But because of that, that sometimes they really don't think. We have so many great grammar memes online. And guys, if you want to have some really good laugh, I encourage you to go on Google, just type grammar memes, and you'll read all those sorts of funny situations that happen to people. Like this one, for example, like there was a sign, smoking is not allowed, but it was spelled like ALOUD. Just like, for example, speaking is not allowed at the library, let's say. But what they meant is it's prohibited. Yes, smoking is prohibited.
Yeah, because they're meaning to say aloud, which sounds exactly like allowed. So those are two different words, different spelling.
Different words.
Right? What are those two words exactly? Because you explained allowed as in permitted, or something that's not prohibited. But what's the other allowed again?
Is like, for example, when you speak aloud, is not you're not speaking to yourself in your thoughts, but actually people can hear what you're saying. You like pronouncing the words. Yeah.
There you go. So again, different spelling, right? If you want to get the exact spelling of these words, you can go to the RealLife app. We have the transcripts of all these episodes, and you can follow our conversation in real time with transcripts, and you also get flashcards for all these advanced expressions that we've been using today. We talked about patterns in the beginning, so you can actually include these words in your active vocabulary by using these smart flashcards.
Izzy, I have a final question for you, and actually this question came from one of our viewers on this channel. I found this comment under one of our videos we made on the topic of grammar, and they are actually an English teacher trying to brushing up maybe, or learn some new techniques of teaching English on our channel. Thank you so much, guys, for watching our channel and sharing your experience with us, asking questions. Remember to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like if you're enjoying it. So coming back to that question, let me read it. And I found it really interesting, and it actually resonates with me a lot. So let me read it. In fact, I'm a non-native teacher, but sometimes I feel upset because as a teacher, people think that you have to know all the grammar accurately. And this idea puts a lot of pressure on me. Please, how do you recommend to solve this problem? Should I know all the grammar rules? So I remind you, this question comes from an English teacher who is a non-native English speaker.
That actually is an interesting question. It depends, again, what are you teaching, or who are you teaching? Because if you're in college and you're teaching people who are going to become linguists, right? People who actually analyze language and understand all these structures and should know grammar, in that case, yeah, right? Or if you're teaching teachers and they care about that kind of stuff, like, then it matters. But if you're teaching people and their goal is to just connect with other people, communicate, why should you be teaching them something that they're not going to be using so much in their communication? So the way to solve that problem is by doing a lot of what we are doing here, which is talking about the mindset, the way you view the language. Because if you change your mindset, the way you see it, it's easier to accept things and to actually remove these barriers, these things that stop you from just speaking naturally and being natural with your learning, with your speaking. A lot of times it's all about mindset.
And by the way, I came across one of the tips for such situations is that, for example, the teacher gamifies it. Let's say students are asked on certain days. It shouldn't happen like every day, okay? Like there is a certain class when a teacher asks students to pay attention to each other's mistakes and bring them and discuss them with the class. Right? So this way, even if it's a teacher's mistake, what if they catch a teacher is making a mistake? They can discuss this with the whole class and learn together from that mistake. What do you think about that, Izzy? Is that a good approach?
I don't think so. I actually don't think that's a good idea. Yeah. I mean, again, if you're teaching linguists, maybe. But if you're teaching kids, for example, like they're learning a lot from what you're doing there. And what you're teaching them there is to really pay attention to people's mistakes and like be pointing fingers. So maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, right? Maybe this is not the point of the teacher. That's not what they're trying to teach. But from my perspective of what I just said about mindset, I think ultimately, even if you're just making it a game, you're trying to make it fun, but it's the wrong kind of game. Last week, when we recorded a podcast about not being afraid of making mistakes, we talked about this game that we play of judgment, of judging other people or judging people by how advanced they sound. And then we fear that people are judging us by how advanced we sound. I said that this is the wrong game to play, to measure yourself, how good you are in that. I think a better game to play is the game of connection and communicating naturally, even if you're making mistakes. So not a good game to play in that classroom, I'd say.
That said, I still remember that we should learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, with that, I agree too, that learning from the mistakes we make or even that other people make is smart. And it is something that you want to do. You want to live and learn. You want to speak, and the mistakes you make, you want to learn from them. That is the fastest way of achieving fluency.
Let me bring you a grammar joke here, Izzy.
Okay.
Okay, so let me bring you guys some context, or just like for you to understand the joke more, to understand the joke better, especially those of you who practice meditation, maybe yoga, maybe you read the book, The Power of Now. You know this concept of focusing on the present, staying in the moment. Here's the joke. Learning French has really encouraged me to live in the moment. It's just because I currently can't conjugate any other verb tense. A little bit nerdy grammar joke.
Yeah, it's a geeky one, yeah.
I liked it. I don't know.
By the way,
told you at the very beginning.
Nerd, geek, what's the difference there? What are those words exactly? What do they mean?
I'm not sure. I really feel that nuance there. Maybe nerd is a little bit negative and geek is a more positive. I'm not sure.
I think nerd has that connotation of it being more antisocial because of your maybe obsession with something, and you're not perceived as a normal person. Maybe it's a nerd, right? And yeah, it can be more negative. But geek, you can be like a video game geek, right? A gamer. So it's your passion, and it's the kind of stuff that you geek out on.
What a phrasal verb. Nice. Geek out on something. It's just like be an expert in something, like really learn deeply about the subject, right? Is that it?
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring us a clip here, another funny clip for us to watch that is related to grammar. I'm sure you love it. Maybe you know it already. Do you remember this episode from The Office when one of the characters, Kevin, I guess, was trying to omit certain words just to save time?
I
remember
do.
that? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Let's watch it. Let's
like
watch
a caveman,
it. Okay?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hey guys, and just to help you better understand, he starts with the words "me mechanic." What he means is my mechanic. Yeah, the guy who fixes his car.
Me mechanic not speak English, but he know what me mean when me say car no go. and we best friends. So me think, why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
Kevin, I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Thank.
Here, we have a word code, the same way we have a dress code. And what we're talking about is basically the speech equivalent to just wearing underpants. Sometimes words need use, but need for talk.
But save time. More success.
Does it save time, though? Because we've been here for about an hour.
No me fault.
Kevin, at most you're saving a microscopic amount of time.
Many small time make big time.
And what are you going to do with all this time?
See world.
Okay. I really loved it. That was so hilarious.
Yeah, even dropped a piece of wisdom there at the end, right? What he did there is actually something that you could do if you're learning a language and you're at a very basic level. You could say, let's say I'm going to start learning Italian and I'm going to omit all these words that connect sentences, like adjectives, right? Functional words like that. And I just use the vocabulary, the nouns, and the words that carry more like the context. It should be fine because we could actually understand what he was saying. So understanding is all about context. It's just like all these words, when they are put together, even if they're in the wrong order, you can still get the context. So if you focus on that first, that's actually a great way of learning a language,
Yeah. That's, exactly what 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗵 was saying when we had him on our Beyond Borders show. We can link that episode in the description, guys. We made an episode with 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗵, who is very strong on mimicking technique. And that's exactly what he was saying, that our brain just works like that. You catch those keywords and you create a sentence in your head. So it's very easy to actually understand this kind of speech.
But then you could actually, say something that other people will misunderstand you. So it is important to also eventually want to learn how to connect these words and be more clear with your speech. And then you're going to get more to an intermediate level. And you're not going to waste time, as he's saying. With English especially, all these words that are more like function words, prepositions, you don't really take so much time. It doesn't really take so much time to say them. We pronounce these in a way that's more unstressed.
They just don't take time. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point with the connected speech. That's exactly how natives save time, by just merging everything together without necessarily omitting function words.
So the boss there, the character Andy, he was talking about a word code or a dress code, which is basically these rules that people expect in a work environment, for example, for people to dress a certain way. So there's a dress code and a word code, which is not even a thing, but it's implied, right? Like you would assume that people will speak using prepositions and stuff at an office, right? So there's a word code. And he used a metaphor there. He's just explaining that, you would expect people to wear underpants, which is the clothing that you wear underneath your shorts or pants or shirt, right? And what's funny is that at that moment, Kevin, he looked at the camera, and I think it's possible to imply that he was not wearing underpants.
It's I had to? Am I supposed to?
Yeah, is that a rule too? Yeah. Anyway, so if you're not watching us on YouTube, you should, because you can catch all these things, right? If you're listening to us on Spotify.
So that was a really hilarious scene from the series The Office. I know lots of people are digging it. Yeah, and that brings us to our next segment, What I'm Digging.
Okay, so I am in the beginning of a relationship, an intimate, romantic relationship with my girlfriend. And we recently went to a party where she got to meet a lot of people in my life, like my friends, and family. And it was dozens of people. And up until that point, she hadn't met barely anyone. I think she had met 2 people. Two two of my friends. And what was interesting was that seeing her meeting my friends for the first time gave me the feeling that I was kind of meeting them for the first time too. It gave me that experience of that first time situation there, And also, I would say that when you're in a relationship like this and you're starting, there's lots of firsts, and it's also nice because like we go to places where I've been like many times, but it's her first time there, like visiting my favorite cafe, coffee shop, and it's so nice, like it's so refreshing, and it's like love being with her in these situations.
That is so cool. And you know what? When you said that, and there were quite a bunch of people, my first thought was, poor girl. Now she has to remember all the names of those friends, and it's so challenging. Like I remember, for example, when I find myself in a group of people, all of them who I meet for the first time. Yeah, it's just like one of the most challenging parts here is to remember all their names. So I don't know, did you help her with that or not?
Actually, we talked about it.
Really?
Yeah, we met like the first person, the second person, and I think when we got to the third person, I said to her, you should not try and memorize their names. There's gonna be like dozens. It was a big party, right? So you see a lot of people, and let's just acknowledge right now that this is gonna be an impossible task. So you're off the hook.
I imagine that she really appreciated that, that thing that you said.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted you here, but the last word you said was off the hook. What was that?
Yeah. So when you say that somebody's off the hook, in something that they're doing, is like you're not making them responsible for the consequences there, or you're saying that, it doesn't matter what you did, it's okay. So you're off the hook.
That was really nice of you, Izzy. I believe she appreciated that.
Yeah, and what's most important there is for her to connect with these people, not to be perfect with remembering their names. So connection over perfection again.
And that's a great segue for us to wrap up today's episode. So guys, all of you who are still with us at the end of the lesson, I want to thank you for staying with us till the end, because I know for some of you, grammar lesson might sound like boring. I hope that Izzy and we did this lesson a little bit engaging, exciting, interesting for you, and not that boring, right? Not that dry, boring grammar lesson.
I feel that this is the kind of topic that, as you said, can be boring, but when you look at it from a fresh perspective, have a fresh vision for grammar that's more real life, then it can be fun, natural, and convenient. Because grammar is everywhere, but at the same time, it is nowhere, because it's all just language.
Remember that grammar exists because of language, and it's not the vice versa scenario when language exists because of grammar. And by the way, guys, please subscribe to our channel. And if you are listening to our podcast on your favorite platform, please give us a 5-star review, leave us comment. And if you want to leave us some feedback or any suggestions for the next lessons, just write us an email at hello@reallifeglobal.com. So leave your English, listen to the Real Life English podcast, and remember, no matter what divides us, that which unites us is far greater. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
In today's lesson, you'll learn many ways to unlock your speaking and stop overthinking because of a fear of making mistakes. Ksenia and I covered different topics that go from more basic techniques you can use to deeper reflections on our fear of being judged and how we can actually deal with it and speak English more naturally. So, without further ado, let's jump into episode 396 of the Real Life English podcast.